The mountain remembers everything. Every footstep carved into frozen earth, every breath that crystallized in the bitter air, every tear that fell and turned to ice before it could reach the ground. For 10 years, Marina had been both ghost and guardian of these peaks, a woman who had learned to speak the language of wolves because she had forgotten how to trust the words of men. She stood at the edge of her world, watching storm clouds gather like dark omens across the valley below, her scarred fingers tracing the bone knife that had kept her alive through seasons that would have claimed lesser souls. The wind carried whispers of a life she had lost, fragments of laughter from a great hall that no longer existed, echoes of a name she had buried beneath layers of survival and silence. Alpha Luna. The title haunted her dreams and mocked her waking hours, a crown of thorns she had never asked to wear. Once, she had been destined for power, promised to a king, heir to a bloodline that stretched back through generations of fierce, noble women. Now she was nothing more than a creature of instinct and necessity, more wolf than woman, more shadow than substance. Yet even here, in this sanctuary of stone and snow, where she had learned that love was a luxury and trust a fatal weakness, Marina could feel the pull of something greater than herself. The mountain had sheltered her, but it could not hold her forever. Somewhere below, the world turned without her. Kingdoms rose and fell, and the darkness she had fled from grew stronger with each passing season. Tonight, the wolves were restless. Tonight, the very air thrummed with the promise of change, and deep in her bones, where memory lived alongside instinct, Marina knew that her time of hiding was finally coming to an end. The hunt was about to begin again, but this time, she would not be the prey. The wind howled through the pine trees like a living thing, carrying with it the promise of another brutal storm. Marina pressed herself deeper into the cave she had carved from the mountainside over the years, her weathered hands pulling the wolf pelts tighter around her shoulders. 10 winters. 10 long, merciless winters since she had first stumbled into these mountains, half dead and completely alone. She couldn't have been more than 15 then, though the exact memories remained frustratingly elusive, like trying to grasp smoke with bare hands. What she did remember was the cold, bone-deep, soul-crushing cold that had nearly claimed her that first night, and the hunger. The kind of hunger that made you consider things no civilized person should ever consider. But she had survived. More than survived. She had conquered these mountains, learned their moods and their secrets. She knew which berries wouldn't kill her, which streams never froze completely, and where to find the caves that stayed warmest during the worst storms. The wolves had been her greatest teachers and, eventually, her family. Marina glanced toward the back of the cave where 3 massive wolves lay sleeping. Storm, the silver-furred alpha who had first accepted her into the pack, lay with his head resting on his paws. Beside him, Luna, the irony of the name wasn't lost on her, kept watch even in sleep, one ear always twitching at the slightest sound. And there was Ghost, the youngest, who had been barely more than a pup when she'd found him orphaned and starving 3 winters ago. Another storm coming, she murmured to them, though only Ghost lifted his head to acknowledge her voice. Big one, by the sound of it. She had learned to read the signs, the way the wind changed direction, how the birds fell silent hours before the first snowflake fell, the restlessness of the smaller animals as they sought shelter. Tonight felt different, though. There was an electricity in the air that had nothing to do with the approaching weather, a tension that made her wolf companions unusually alert. Marina moved to the mouth of the cave, peering out into the growing darkness. The mountain landscape spread below her like a frozen sea, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Somewhere down there, beyond the tree line, lay the world she had once known. The world she had fled from, though the reasons remained locked away in the damaged corners of her memory. She touched the scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw, a permanent reminder of whatever violence had driven her to these heights. Sometimes, in her dreams, she caught glimpses of faces, kind eyes that might have belonged to parents, voices calling a name that wasn't Marina, but daylight always washed the dreams away, leaving only questions without answers. A howl echoed across the valley, long and mournful, but this wasn't the call of her pack brothers. This was different, deeper, more complex, almost like Marina's breath caught in her throat. That had sounded almost human. Storm was on his feet now, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Luna and Ghost flanked him, All three focused intently on something moving through the trees far below. Marina squinted into the darkness, her enhanced night vision, another gift of her years in the wild, picking out shapes that didn't belong. Torches. At least a dozen of them, moving in formation up the mountain path. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she watched the lights grow larger, closer. In 10 years, no one had come this high into the mountains. No one had found her. "Who are you?" she whispered, though the wind swallowed her words. The wolves pressed closer to her, sensing her distress. Storm bumped his massive head against her shoulder, a gesture of comfort and solidarity. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. Marina retreated deeper into the cave, her mind racing through possibilities. Hunters? Unlikely. No prey was worth the treacherous climb at this time of year. Treasure seekers? The mountains held nothing of value except solitude and death. Unless they were looking for her. The thought sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the mountain air. She had always known this day might come, had always been prepared to run deeper into the wilderness if necessary. But where could she go that they couldn't follow? And why now, after all this time? The sound of voices reached her ears, carried on the wind. Deep voices, speaking in a language that tugged at something buried in her memory. The words felt familiar, like a song half remembered from childhood. Fan out. Check every cave, every shelter. She has to be here somewhere. Marina's blood turned to ice. They were looking for someone, a woman, and given the timing and the location, the tracks are fresh. Wolf tracks, but larger than normal. And there, human footprints alongside them. They had found her trail. Marina's hands shook as she gathered her few possessions. The bone knife she'd carved herself, the firestones that had saved her life countless times, the small pouch of dried meat that was always ready for a quick escape. The wolves watched her movements with intelligent eyes, understanding that danger was approaching. "I'm sorry," she whispered to them. "I'm so sorry." She couldn't ask them to run with her. Storm was getting old, his joints stiff from too many hard winters. Luna had a slight limp from an encounter with a bear the previous spring, and Ghost, despite his size, was still young and occasionally reckless. They would be safer here, in the territory they knew. Marina kissed each of their noble heads, holding back tears. They had been her family when she had no one else, had kept her sane and alive through the darkest periods of her exile. Leaving them felt like tearing out her own heart. She was halfway to the cave's rear exit, when Storm's warning growl froze her in place. The entrance to the cave was no longer empty. A man stood silhouetted against the torchlight, tall and broad-shouldered, with a presence that seemed to fill the entire space. Even from a distance, Marina could see the strength in his frame, the way he held himself like someone accustomed to command. But it was his scent that made her wolf instincts scream in recognition. Pine and steel, and something indefinably wild that called to the deepest parts of her soul. "Easy," he said, and his voice was like warm honey over broken glass. "I'm not here to hurt you." The wolves hadn't attacked, which was remarkable in itself. Storm stood protectively in front of Marina, but his hackles had lowered slightly. Luna and Ghost flanked the stranger, but made no aggressive moves. "You have about 30 seconds before my men surround this cave," the man continued, taking a careful step forward. "You can run, and we'll chase you through the mountains until you collapse from exhaustion. Or you can trust me when I say that everything is about to change for the better." Marina found her voice, rusty from disuse around strangers. "Who are you?" Even in the dim light, she could see him smile. It transformed his entire face, making him seem younger and infinitely more dangerous to her peace of mind. "My name is Kieran," he said, "and I've been searching for you for 10 very long years." The name hit her like a physical blow, awakening something deep in her memory. Images flashed through her mind. A young man with kind eyes, a promise whispered under starlight, hands that held her with infinite gentleness. "That's impossible," she breathed. "I don't know you." But even as she spoke the words, her heart was telling her they were lies. Kieran took another step closer, and Marina could see his face more clearly now. Strong jaw, dark hair that looked like he'd been running his fingers through it, and eyes the color of storm clouds that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed walls. "You're hurt," he said, his gaze fixed on her scar. The fury that flashed across his features was so intense that Marina actually took a step backward. "Who did this to you?" "I don't remember," she said honestly. I don't remember much of anything before I came here. Something in his expression shifted, became infinitely gentle. That's all right. We'll figure it out together. He paused, as if gathering courage for his next words. Marina. Your name is Marina. Hearing her real name spoken aloud after so many years was like being struck by lightning. The sound of it unlocked something inside her, and suddenly she was drowning in fragments of memory, dancing at a festival, learning to shift under a full moon, a woman with kind eyes teaching her to braid herbs for healing, and running through the night while behind her, everything she had ever loved burned. No, Marina gasped, pressing her hands to her temples as the memories crashed over her in waves. No, no, no. Kieran was beside her instantly, his hands gentle on her shoulders. It's all right. You're safe now. You're safe. But she wasn't safe, and she never would be, because the memories were coming back now, and with them, the knowledge of exactly who she was, and why she had been hiding in these mountains for 10 years. The pack, she whispered. My pack. They're all dead, aren't they? Kieran's silence was answer enough. Marina felt the last of her strength leave her legs, and she would have collapsed if not for Kieran's strong arms catching her. He held her while she shook, while the weight of everything she had lost came crashing down on her all over again. I'm sorry, he murmured into her hair. I'm so sorry, Marina. But you're not alone anymore. Through her grief, Marina became aware of other figures entering the cave. Men in dark clothing who moved with military precision, but who kept their distance and their weapons sheathed. Whatever Kieran's intentions, his people respected his orders. We need to go, one of them said quietly. The storm is getting worse, and we have a long journey back. Kieran looked down at Marina, his expression unreadable. Will you come with me? Marina looked around the cave that had been her home for so long, at the wolves who had been her family, at the simple life she had built from nothing but determination and survival instinct. She could refuse. She could demand answers first, or insist on staying where she was safe and known. But deep down, she knew that safety was an illusion. It always had been. The wolves, she said quietly. I won't leave them to starve. Kieran's smile was soft and understanding. They can come with us, all of them. Storm approached then, his intelligent eyes moving between Marina and Kieran before he did something that shocked everyone present. He bowed his head to Kieran in clear submission. Luna and Ghost followed suit, recognizing an alpha's authority even across species lines. Marina stared at the display in amazement. In all her years with the pack, she had never seen Storm submit to anyone. What are you? She asked Kieran. His storm-gray eyes met hers steadily. I'm the Alpha King, he said simply. And you, Marina, are my Luna. The world tilted on its axis. Luna, the title that had haunted her dreams, that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. She was a Luna, not just any Luna, but his Luna. That's impossible, she whispered. I know it's a lot to process, Kieran said gently, but we can talk about everything once we're somewhere warm and safe. Right now, I need to get you off this mountain before the storm hits. Marina looked around the cave one last time, memorizing every detail. This place had saved her life, had given her 10 years to heal and grow strong, but she could feel the truth of Kieran's words resonating in her bones. Her time here was over. All right, she said finally. I'll come with you. The relief on Kieran's face was so profound that Marina wondered just how much her answer had meant to him. He helped her gather her few belongings, while his men prepared the wolves for the journey down the mountain. As they left the cave, Marina felt the first snowflakes of the storm begin to fall. She looked back once, seeing the place that had been her sanctuary disappearing into the swirling white. Whatever lay ahead, there would be no going back. Kieran appeared at her side, offering his arm for support on the treacherous path. Are you ready? He asked. Marina thought about the question seriously. Ready for what? To reclaim a life she couldn't remember? To take on responsibilities she didn't understand? To trust a man who claimed to be her destined mate, but who was essentially a stranger? No, she wasn't ready for any of that. But as she took Kieran's offered arm and felt the immediate sense of rightness that came with his touch, Marina realized that perhaps being ready wasn't the point. Perhaps courage was simply the act of moving forward despite uncertainty. Yes, she said, and meant it. I'm ready. The journey down the mountain took 3 days, and with each step away from her sanctuary, Marina felt pieces of her forgotten life clicking back into place, like shards of a broken mirror. The memories came in waves, some gentle, others devastating in their intensity. She remembered her mother's laugh, warm and musical as honey. She remembered her father teaching her to track deer through autumn leaves. She remembered a younger Kieran, barely 18, the day he told her they were destined mates. And she remembered the night everything had gone wrong. "You're remembering," Kieran observed on the second evening as they made camp in a sheltered valley. He'd been watching her closely throughout the journey, noting every wince when a particularly painful memory surfaced, every moment when recognition flickered across her features. Marina nodded, pulling her borrowed cloak tighter around her shoulders. The men had given her proper clothes, warm and well-made, but she still felt exposed without her wolf pelts. Some things. Not everything. Storm lay beside her, his massive head resting across her lap in a gesture of comfort. The wolf had taken to Kieran better than Marina had expected, but he remained protective of her, never straying far from her side. "Do you remember us?" Kieran asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them. Marina studied his face in the firelight, seeing echoes of the boy she'd once known in the man before her. He'd grown harder over the years, more commanding, with new scars marking his hands, and a weight in his eyes that spoke of difficult choices and heavy responsibilities. "I remember some things," she said carefully. "I remember that we were promised to each other. Our parents arranged it when we were children." Pain flashed across Kieran's features. "Is that all you remember? The arrangement?" Marina's heart clenched at the hurt in his voice. She remembered more than that. Much more. She remembered stolen moments when they'd sneak away from their duties, talking for hours about their dreams and fears. She remembered the first time he'd kissed her, gentle and hesitant, under the light of a harvest moon. She remembered falling asleep in his arms the night before everything fell apart, feeling safer than she ever had in her life. But remembering those feelings made what came next so much harder to bear. "I remember the attack," she said instead, her voice barely above a whisper. Kieran's entire body went rigid. Around the fire, his men stopped their quiet conversations, sensing the shift in their leader's mood. "Tell me," he said, and there was command in his voice now, the alpha demanding answers. Marina closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her. It was supposed to be our mating ceremony. 3 days of celebration before the full moon when we would complete the bond. Her hands unconsciously moved to her scar. The Shadowmere pack attacked during the feast. They came out of nowhere, moved like ghosts through our defenses. She could see it all again. The great hall decorated with flowers and ribbons, the tables laden with food, the joy and laughter that had filled the air. And then the screams, the sound of claws on stone, the smell of blood and smoke as everything beautiful burned. "They killed my parents first," Marina continued, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Made me watch. Then they said," she swallowed hard, "they said that killing me quickly would be too merciful, that I needed to suffer for what my bloodline represented." Kieran's hands were clenched into fists, his eyes blazing with fury. "What did they do to you?" "They gave me to their Omega, the mad one. He was supposed to break me slowly, make me beg for death." Marina touched her scar again. "He tried. For 3 days, he tried. But on the third night, something inside me snapped. I shifted for the first time and tore his throat out." The camp had gone completely silent. Even the wolves seemed to be listening, their ears pricked forward attentively. "I ran," Marina said. "I ran and I kept running until I couldn't run anymore. When I finally collapsed, I was at the base of the mountain. I would have died there if Storm hadn't found me." She looked down at the wolf in her lap, stroking his silver fur. He was younger then, leading his first pack. They should have seen me as prey, but instead, she smiled softly. "Instead, they adopted me, taught me how to survive." "Why didn't you try to find me?" Kieran asked, and there was such pain in his voice that Marina's heart broke all over again. "Because I thought you were dead," she whispered. "I thought everyone was dead. The Shadowmere wolves made sure I knew that they had burned everything, killed everyone. They wanted me to understand that I was truly alone in the world." Kieran was silent for a long moment, processing her words. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I was away when it happened, leading a diplomatic mission to the Eastern Territories. By the time I got back," he shook his head, "there was nothing left but ash and bodies. We searched for you for months, but there was no trail, no scent to follow. Eventually, the council declared you dead, but you never stopped looking." "Never," he said firmly. "I knew in my heart that you were still alive. I could feel it, even when everyone else told me to accept the truth and choose a new mate. Marina's breath caught. Did you? Choose someone else? The question had been haunting her since she'd learned who Kieran had become. An Alpha King needed a Luna, needed heirs to secure his bloodline. 10 years was a long time to wait for a ghost. No, Kieran said simply. There was never anyone else. There could never be anyone else. The certainty in his voice made her chest tight with emotions she wasn't ready to examine. She looked away, focusing on the fire instead of the intensity in his storm-gray eyes. Everything's different now, she said quietly. I'm different. 10 years in the wild changes a person, Kieran. I don't know if I can be what you need me to be. What do you think I need? Marina gestured helplessly. A proper Luna. Someone who knows how to navigate court politics, how to host diplomatic dinners, how to be graceful and refined and everything I'm not anymore. Kieran moved closer, close enough that she could smell his pine and steel scent, close enough to see the sincerity in his eyes. Do you know what I need, Marina? I need someone strong enough to survive 10 winters alone on a mountain. I need someone brave enough to face down a madman to save herself. I need someone with enough compassion to adopt a pack of wolves and enough wisdom to earn their loyalty. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her scarred cheek in his palm. I need you, exactly as you are. Exactly as... Marina leaned into his touch despite herself, starved for gentleness after so many years of solitude. You say that now, but when we reach your capital, when you see how people react to me, then they'll learn to adjust, Kieran said firmly. I'm the Alpha King, Marina. My word is law, and my word is that you are my chosen Luna, now and always. Before Marina could respond, one of Kieran's men approached the fire. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but the scouts have returned with news. Kieran's expression immediately shifted to alertness. What is it, Marcus? The Shadowmere Pack has been active again. 3 border settlements attacked in the past month. They're moving closer to the capital. Marina felt ice form in her veins. They're still alive? The pack that attacked mine? Marcus nodded grimly. Not just alive, but stronger than ever. They've been absorbing smaller packs, either through conquest or intimidation. Their numbers have tripled since the attack on your territory. And their alpha? Kieran asked. Still Darius Blackthorn. Still completely mad, from all reports. The name hit Marina like a physical blow. Darius Blackthorn, the alpha who had ordered her family's death, who had watched with cold satisfaction as her world burned. She had sometimes wondered if he was still alive, had occasionally hoped that someone had put him down like the rabid animal he was. He's looking for me, she said with sudden certainty. The attacks, the movement toward the capital. He knows I'm alive. Kieran's jaw tightened. How could he know? You've been hidden for 10 years. Marina looked around the camp, at the dozen men who had accompanied them down the mountain. All of them loyal to Kieran, all of them trustworthy. But information had a way of traveling, especially when it concerned someone thought long dead. Word travels fast in our world, she said. Someone will have seen us, will have recognized what I am. By now, half the kingdom probably knows that the lost Luna has been found. Then we'll be ready for him, Kieran said, and there was steel in his voice. This time he won't catch us unprepared. Marina wanted to share his confidence, but she had seen what Darius Blackthorn was capable of. He wasn't just powerful. He was cunning, patient, and completely without conscience. He had spent 10 years building his strength while she hid in the mountains. What chance did they have against him? Storm lifted his head from her lap. His ears pricked forward. A moment later, Luna and Ghost were on their feet as well, all 3 wolves staring intently into the darkness beyond the firelight. What is it? Kieran asked, but Marina was already reaching for the bone knife at her belt. The attack came from 3 directions at once. Dark shapes exploded from the forest, moving with inhuman speed and coordination. Kieran's men barely had time to draw their weapons before the Shadowmere wolves were among them. Marina found herself facing a massive black wolf with yellow eyes that burned with malevolent intelligence. She recognized him. Fenris, Darius's second-in-command, the one who had held her while his alpha explained exactly how she was going to die. "Hello, little Luna," he snarled, his voice a mixture of human speech and wolf growl. "Did you miss us?" Marina's response was to bury her knife in his shoulder. The bone blade, sharpened on mountain stone for 10 years, slid between his ribs like it was meant to be there. Fenris howled in pain and rage, swiping at her with claws that would have disemboweled her if Storm hadn't slammed into his side. Chaos erupted around them. Kieran fought with the deadly grace of a trained warrior, his sword cutting down enemies with ruthless efficiency. His men formed a protective circle, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Marina lost sight of Kieran in the melee, her world narrowing to the immediate threats around her. A wolf lunged at her from the left. Luna intercepted it, her jaws clamping down on its throat with bone-crushing force. Ghost darted between her legs, tripping another attacker and giving her the opening she needed to strike. But there were too many of them. For every enemy they brought down, 2 more seemed to take their place. Marina felt claws rake across her back, felt warm blood soak through her shirt, and knew they were losing. Then she heard Kieran roar, a sound so primal and powerful that it stopped the battle for a heartbeat. When she looked toward the sound, Marina saw something that made her blood run cold. Kieran was surrounded, 3 massive wolves circling him like sharks. His sword was gone, probably knocked from his hands, and there was blood streaming down his face from a gash above his eye. He was favoring his left leg, and Marina could see the tear in his pants where claws had found their mark. One of the wolves, a scarred brute with gray fur, gathered himself to spring. Marina knew with horrible certainty that Kieran wouldn't be able to dodge in time. She moved without thinking, her body reacting on pure instinct. The shift came easier than it ever had, her human form melting away in a cascade of silver light. When she landed, it was on 4 paws, her wolf form larger and more powerful than it had ever been in the mountains. The gray wolf never saw her coming. Marina's jaws closed around his neck with a crunch of vertebrae, and she shook him like a rag doll before tossing his lifeless body aside. The other 2 wolves backed away, suddenly uncertain. Around the camp, the battle began to turn. Marina's shift had somehow energized Kieran's men, while the Shadowmere wolves seemed shaken by the display of power. They began to retreat, melting back into the forest as quickly as they had appeared, but not all of them. Fenris, still bleeding from the wound in his shoulder, approached slowly, his yellow eyes fixed on Marina with hatred so pure it was almost tangible. "You can't hide forever, Luna," he snarled. "And when our Alpha finds you, and he will find you, your death will make what happened to your parents look merciful." Before Marina could respond, Fenris threw back his head and howled. The sound was picked up by his retreating packmates, echoing through the valley like a promise of violence to come. Then he was gone, vanishing into the darkness with the rest of his pack. Marina shifted back to human form, swaying on her feet as the adrenaline left her system. Kieran was beside her instantly, his hands gentle as he checked her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently. "I'm fine," she managed, though she wasn't sure that was true. The shift had taken more out of her than expected, and the cuts on her back were beginning to throb. "That was incredible," Marcus said, approaching with obvious awe. "I've never seen a shift like that. The power—" "She's an Alpha Luna," Kieran said quietly, pride evident in his voice. "The firstborn to the bloodline in over a century." Marina stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means you're more powerful than any of us realized," he said, helping her to sit by the dying fire. "It means Darius has even more reason to want you dead." As if summoned by his words, a new howl echoed across the valley, longer, deeper, and filled with such malevolent joy that it made everyone in the camp shiver. "He's coming," Marina whispered, recognizing that voice from her nightmares. "Darius is coming himself." Kieran's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Then we'll be ready for him." But as they broke camp and began the final push toward the capital, Marina couldn't shake the feeling that being ready might not be enough. Darius Blackthorn had spent 10 years planning his revenge, and now he knew exactly where to find her. The hunt was about to begin in earnest. The capital city of Ravencrest sprawled across the valley like a living organism, its stone buildings and soaring towers breathing with the life of hundreds of thousands of souls. Marina had forgotten how overwhelming civilization could be after her years in the mountains. The noise, the smells, the press of bodies, it all crashed over her in waves that left her feeling dizzy and disoriented. "Easy," Kieran murmured beside her as their procession passed through the main gates. "I know it's a lot to take in." Marina nodded, trying to focus on his voice rather than the growing crowd that had gathered to watch their arrival. Word had indeed traveled fast. People lined the streets, craning their necks for a glimpse of the lost Luna, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical to openly hostile. "She doesn't look like much," someone whispered, not quite quietly enough. 10 years in the wild. Another voice added with obvious disdain. She's probably more animal than woman now. Those scars, a third person commented with barely concealed revulsion. How hideous. Each whispered comment hit Marina like a physical blow, confirming every fear she'd harbored about returning to civilization. She pulled her hood lower over her face, wishing she could disappear entirely. Storm, Luna, and Ghost padded alongside their horses, their presence a comfort in the sea of unfamiliar faces. The wolves' calm dignity seemed to unsettle the crowd more than any display of aggression would have. Here were apex predators walking peacefully through their streets, and it forced them to reconsider their assumptions about the woman who commanded their loyalty. The royal palace rose before them like something from a fever dream, all white marble and soaring spires that seemed to touch the clouds themselves. Marina remembered visiting here as a child, but her memories had dimmed the reality of its grandeur. It was beautiful and intimidating in equal measure, designed to remind visitors of their place in the natural order. "Welcome home," Kieran said softly as they rode through the palace gates. Home. The word felt foreign on Marina's tongue. This place had never been her home, even before the attack. Her home had been a modest manor house surrounded by forests and streams, a place where she'd been free to run wild and explore without the weight of protocol and expectations. The courtyard filled with servants and officials, all eager to catch a glimpse of the returned Luna. Marina dismounted carefully, her legs shaky from the long ride and the constant vigilance the journey had required. Since the attack 3 nights ago, they had traveled without rest, knowing that Darius and his pack were somewhere behind them. An elderly woman approached with the measured steps of someone accustomed to authority. She was impeccably dressed in deep blue silk, her silver hair arranged in an elaborate style that spoke of hours of careful preparation. When she reached Marina, her pale eyes conducted a thorough inspection that left Marina feeling like a horse being evaluated at market. "Your Majesty," the woman said, addressing Kieran but never taking her eyes off Marina. "I am Lady Cordelia Ashworth, mistress of the royal household. We have prepared chambers for the young woman." The pause before young woman spoke volumes about Lady Ashworth's opinion of Marina's legitimacy. "Lady Ashworth," Kieran replied with careful courtesy, "may I present Luna Marina, rightful heir to the Silverstone bloodline and my chosen mate." "Of course," Lady Ashworth said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Though I'm sure you understand that certain formalities must be observed. The council will need to verify her identity, and there are protocols to follow regarding the recognition of a Luna who has been absent for so long." Marina felt a flash of anger at being discussed as if she weren't standing right there, but Kieran's warning look kept her silent. "Naturally," he said, "but those formalities can wait until Lady Marina has had time to rest and recover from her ordeal. She has endured more than enough for one lifetime." "Certainly," Lady Ashworth agreed, though her tone suggested otherwise. "I've taken the liberty of assigning her chambers in the East Wing, near the other guests of the crown." The diplomatic way she said guests made it clear that Marina was being relegated to quarters typically reserved for hostages and political prisoners, rather than honored visitors. "Actually," Kieran said smoothly, "Lady Marina will be staying in the Luna's quarters. Please ensure they are prepared immediately." The suggestion caused a ripple of shock through the assembled crowd. The Luna's quarters had been sealed for decades, maintained but never occupied since the last recognized Luna had died in childbirth 50 years earlier. "Your Majesty," Lady Ashworth said carefully, "perhaps it would be more appropriate to wait until the council has formally recognized the Luna's quarters," Kieran repeated, and this time his voice carried the unmistakable weight of royal command. "Is there some part of that instruction you find unclear, Lady Ashworth?" The older woman's face flushed, but she bowed her head in submission. "Of course, Your Majesty. It will be done immediately." As Lady Ashworth hurried away to carry out his orders, Kieran turned to Marina with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry about that. There are always politics to navigate, but I won't let anyone treat you as less than what you are." Marina nodded, though she wasn't sure she agreed with his assessment of what she was. The whispered comments from the crowd still echoed in her ears, and she couldn't shake the feeling that many of these people would prefer their king to choose someone more traditional. "The wolves," she said suddenly, looking around for her companions. "Where will they stay?" "Wherever you want them to," Kieran assured her. "The Luna's quarters include private gardens. They'll be comfortable there." A young man approached then, tall and lean with dark hair and intelligent brown eyes. Unlike the others, he smiled when he saw Marina, the expression warm and genuine. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing to Kieran before turning to Marina. "And you must be the famous Luna Marina. I'm Alexander Rowe, the king's advisor and oldest friend. It's an honor to finally meet you." Marina found herself smiling back, drawn to his easy manner. "The honor is mine, Lord Alexander. Just Alexander, please. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot of each other." He glanced between her and Kieran with knowing eyes. "His Majesty has spoken of little else but finding you for the past decade. We're all very glad to have you home." The sincerity in his voice was like balm on the wounds left by the crowd's reception. Here, at least, was someone who seemed genuinely pleased by her return. "Alexander will help you navigate the complexities of court life," Kieran explained. "He's the one person here I trust completely." "Speaking of which," Alexander said, his expression growing serious, "we need to discuss the security situation. Word of the attacks has already reached the council, and they're demanding answers." Kieran's jaw tightened. "How much do they know?" "Enough to be concerned. The fact that the Shadowmere Pact targeted your party specifically suggests they have intelligence about Lady Marina's return. The council wants to know how that's possible." Marina felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "You think there's a spy in the palace?" "It's possible," Alexander admitted reluctantly. "Information about royal movements is closely guarded, but there are always people willing to sell secrets for the right price." The thought that someone in Kieran's inner circle might be working with Darius made Marina's stomach turn. She had learned to trust cautiously during her years in the wilderness, and the idea of being surrounded by potential enemies was deeply unsettling. "We'll deal with that later," Kieran said firmly. "Right now, I want Marina settled and comfortable. Everything else can wait." But as they made their way through the palace's opulent corridors, Marina couldn't shake the feeling that time was a luxury they didn't have. Somewhere out there, Darius Blackthorn was planning his next move, and every hour they delayed gave him more opportunity to strike. The Luna's quarters were even more magnificent than Marina had expected. The main chamber was larger than her entire cave had been, with soaring ceilings and tall windows that offered spectacular views of the city below. Rich tapestries covered the walls, depicting scenes of wolves running through moonlit forests, and the furniture was crafted from deep, warm woods that invited touch. "It's beautiful," Marina said quietly, running her fingers over a carved table that must have taken months to complete. "It's yours," Kieran replied. "All of it. These rooms have been waiting for you for 10 years. Marina turned to study his face, seeing the hope and uncertainty he was trying to hide. "Kieran, about what you said in the mountains, about us being mates. You don't remember our bond," he said, and it wasn't a question. "I remember caring for you," Marina admitted. "I remember being happy when we were together, before everything went wrong. But the mating bond, I can't feel it anymore. It's like that part of me was damaged along with everything else." The pain that flashed across Kieran's features was quickly suppressed, but Marina saw it nonetheless. She hated hurting him, but he deserved honesty. "Maybe it will come back," he said hopefully, "when you've had more time to heal, to remember who you were before." "And if it doesn't?" Marina asked gently. "If I can never be the mate you need me to be?" Kieran was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but sad. "Then we'll figure out another way forward. But Marina, I want you to know, bond or no bond, you are the only woman I could ever love. That hasn't changed in 10 years, and it never will." The conviction in his voice made her chest tight with emotions she wasn't ready to examine. She cared for Kieran, deeply, but love? The kind of all-consuming, soul-deep love that was supposed to exist between true mates? She honestly didn't know if she was capable of that anymore. "I should let you rest," Kieran said, moving toward the door. "Dinner is served at sunset if you feel up to joining the court. If not, Alexander can have something sent to your rooms." After he left, Marina sank into one of the velvet-upholstered chairs and let herself truly relax for the first time in days. Storm, Luna, and Ghost had settled comfortably in the attached garden, visible through the glass doors that opened onto a private terrace. For the moment at least, they were all safe. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting to see a servant with food or clothing. Instead, a young woman entered, perhaps 20 years old, with auburn hair and bright green eyes. She was beautifully dressed in a gown of deep emerald silk, that probably cost more than most people earned in a year, and she moved with the confident grace of someone born to privilege. "Lady Marina," the woman said with a curtsy that was technically correct, but somehow managed to convey subtle disrespect. "I'm Lady Catherine Whitmore. I wanted to welcome you to court." Marina rose politely, though something about the woman's smile set her instincts on edge. "Thank you, that's very kind. I hope you don't mind my saying so, but your return has caused quite a stir," Catherine continued, settling herself in a chair without being invited. "People have so many questions about where you've been all these years." "I'm sure they do," Marina replied carefully. Catherine's eyes glittered with malicious interest. 10 years is such a long time to be away from civilization. It must have been challenging to maintain your dignity and virtue under such primitive conditions. The implication in her words was clear, and Marina felt her temper flare. "I survived," she said coldly. "That's what matters." "Oh, of course," Catherine said quickly. "I didn't mean to suggest. It's just that some people might wonder about the propriety of His Majesty taking a mate who has been living wild for so long. After all, a Luna must be above reproach." Marina's hands clenched into fists, but she forced her voice to remain level. "I think His Majesty is capable of making his own decisions about such matters." "Naturally," Catherine agreed with false sweetness. "Though I'm sure you understand that the king's advisors have responsibilities to consider all possibilities. For instance, if you were to find that court life doesn't suit you, or if you decide that you're not ready for the demands of being Luna, then what?" Marina asked, her patience finally snapping. Catherine's smile became predatory. "Then perhaps it would be better for everyone if you quietly withdrew from consideration. There are other ladies at court who would be honored to serve as His Majesty's Luna, ladies who have been trained from birth for such responsibilities." "Ladies like yourself," Marina guessed. "I would never presume," Catherine said with false modesty. "Though my family has served the crown loyally for generations, and I have been educated in all the arts appropriate to my station." The threat was clear now. Catherine saw Marina as an obstacle to her own ambitions, and was making it known that she wouldn't go down without a fight. "I appreciate your concern," Marina said with icy politeness. "But I think you'll find that 10 years of surviving in the wilderness has prepared me for challenges you can't imagine, including dealing with ambitious courtiers who mistake manipulation for diplomacy." Catherine's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculating mind beneath the pretty exterior. Then she smiled again, and rose gracefully to her feet. "I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other," she said sweetly. "Court can be such a dangerous place for those who don't understand its intricacies. I do hope you'll be careful." After Catherine left, Marina remained standing by the window, watching the sun set over the city. The encounter had reminded her forcefully that the palace held dangers beyond those posed by Darius Blackthorne. Here, the weapons were words and whispers, but they could be just as deadly as claws and fangs. A commotion in the courtyard below caught her attention. A messenger had arrived, his horse lathered with sweat from hard riding. Marina watched as Kieran emerged to receive whatever news the man brought, saw the way the king's face darkened as he read the message. Whatever the news was, it wasn't good. Moments later, Alexander appeared at her door, his usual easy manner replaced by grim urgency. "Marina, we need you in the war room immediately," he said without preamble. "What's happened?" "Darius has made his move. 3 more villages burned, and this time he left a message." Marina's blood turned to ice. "What kind of message?" Alexander's expression was grave. "He's challenging Kieran to single combat. Winner takes all. The throne, the kingdom, and you." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Single combat was an ancient tradition, dating back to the earliest days of their people. It was legally binding and absolutely final. If Kieran accepted and lost, Darius would become the rightful Alpha King, and Marina would become his prize. "Kieran won't accept," she said, though even as she spoke the words, she knew she was wrong. "He's already drafting his response," Alexander said quietly. The challenge was issued publicly, witnessed by dozens of survivors from the attacked villages. If he refuses, he'll be seen as a coward, and his authority will be undermined. The kingdom would tear itself apart. Marina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices settling on her shoulders. If Kieran fought and lost, everyone she cared about would die. But if he didn't fight, the kingdom would descend into civil war, and countless innocents would suffer. "There has to be another way," she whispered. "Maybe there is," Alexander said slowly, "but you're not going to like it." Marina opened her eyes, meeting his gaze steadily. "Tell me. The challenge is for you, specifically. If you weren't here, if you had never returned, then the legal basis for the combat would disappear." The suggestion hung in the air between them. Marina could leave, could disappear back into the wilderness and live out her days in the mountains with her wolf pack. Kieran would be free to choose another Luna, one who wouldn't bring such danger to his throne. "No," she said firmly. "I won't run again." "Marina, I said no," she repeated with steel in her voice. "I spent 10 years hiding while that monster grew stronger and more dangerous. How many people died because I wasn't here to help stop him? How many villages burned while I lived in safety on my mountain?" Alexander studied her face, seeing the determination there. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that we find a way to end this that doesn't involve Kieran risking his life for mine," Marina said. "Darius wants me? Fine. But he's going to get more than he bargained for. You can't seriously be considering facing him yourself," Alexander protested. "He's one of the most powerful alphas alive, and he's completely insane. It would be suicide." "Would it?" Marina asked thoughtfully. "You said yourself that I'm an Alpha Luna, the firstborn to the bloodline in over a century. Maybe it's time to find out exactly what that means." Before Alexander could respond, Kieran appeared in the doorway, his face grim with the weight of the decision he was facing. "You heard," he said, looking between Marina and Alexander. "I heard," Marina confirmed. "And I have a proposition for you." Kieran's eyes narrowed. "What kind of proposition?" "Let me face him," Marina said simply. "Not you. Me." "Absolutely not," Kieran said immediately. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself." "It wouldn't be a sacrifice," Marina interrupted. "It would be justice. He killed my family, destroyed my pack, stole 10 years of my life. This fight was always going to be between me and him. You know that." Kieran shook his head stubbornly. "I'm the Alpha King. It's my responsibility to protect my people, including you. And I'm the Alpha Luna," Marina countered. "Or I will be, once the council recognizes me. Don't I have responsibilities too?" The argument that followed was fierce but brief. In the end, it was Storm who settled the matter. The great wolf appeared in the doorway, padding silently across the room to where Marina stood. He looked up at her with intelligent yellow eyes, then tilted his head back and howled. The sound was unlike anything Marina had ever heard from him before. Not a call to hunt or a warning of danger, but something deeper and more primal. It spoke of ancient pacts between wolves and humans, of bonds that transcended species, of loyalty that endured beyond death itself. Luna and Ghost joined in, their voices harmonizing with Storm's in a song that seemed to resonate in the very stones of the palace. And then, incredibly, other wolves began to answer from the city below. The royal hunt pack, the working dogs with wolf blood, even the palace cats seemed to respond to the call. When the howling finally faded, the room was silent, except for the sound of their breathing. "They're telling you that they accept me as their alpha," Marina said quietly. "All of them. Even the ones who have never met me." Kieran stared at her, seeing something in her face that hadn't been there before. The uncertain, damaged woman who had hidden in the mountains was gone, replaced by someone who radiated quiet authority and unshakable determination. "You're really going to do this," he said, and it wasn't a question. "I have to," Marina replied. "This kingdom deserves better than to be torn apart by our personal history, and Darius deserves to face the consequences of what he did to my family." Alexander cleared his throat. "If you're serious about this, there are preparations to make. The combat laws are ancient and specific. There are rituals to observe, weapons to choose, terms to negotiate. Then we'd better get started," Marina said. "How long do we have?" "The challenge specifies a fortnight from tomorrow," Kieran said reluctantly. 15 days to prepare." "That should be enough," Marina said with more confidence than she felt. "I've been preparing for this fight for 10 years, whether I knew it or not." As they began to plan for what might be the most important battle in the kingdom's history, Marina felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. For the first time since leaving the mountain, she felt truly certain about her path forward. She had spent a decade learning to be a survivor. Now it was time to learn how to be a Luna. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and somewhere in the darkness, Darius Blackthorn prepared for the confrontation that would determine the fate of them all. But Marina was no longer the frightened girl who had fled into the wilderness 10 years ago. She was something new, something powerful, and she was done running. The hunt was about to begin, but this time, she would be the predator, not the prey. And when it was over, one way or another, the ghost of her past would finally be laid to rest. The 15 days that followed passed in a blur of training, preparation, and political maneuvering that tested every skill Marina had developed during her years of solitude. Each dawn found her in the practice yards, working with the kingdom's finest warriors to hone techniques she had learned through necessity rather than formal instruction. "Your form is unconventional," observed Master Garrett, the royal weapons instructor, as he watched her work through sword drills. "But effective. You fight like someone who has never had the luxury of rules." Marina wiped sweat from her brow, adjusting her grip on the practice blade. "In the mountains, the only rule was survival. That mindset will serve you well," Garrett said approvingly. "Darius Blackthorn is a traditionalist. He'll expect you to fight with court-trained precision. Your unpredictability could be your greatest advantage." But weapons training was only part of Marina's preparation. Alexander spent hours coaching her on the legal intricacies of formal combat, while Kieran worked with her on the political implications of her challenge. "Remember," Kieran said during one of their strategy sessions, "this isn't just about defeating Darius. It's about demonstrating to the kingdom that you are the rightful Luna, that your strength is equal to the responsibilities you're claiming." "No pressure," Marina muttered, earning a sympathetic smile from Alexander. "Actually, there's more pressure than you know," he said seriously. "Lady Catherine has been spreading rumors about your unconventional background. She's managed to convince several council members that accepting you as Luna would set a dangerous precedent." Marina's jaw tightened. The ambitious courtier had made herself a constant irritant over the past 2 weeks, always appearing at the worst possible moments with subtle insults disguised as helpful suggestions. "What kind of dangerous precedent?" she asked. "That any woman with a claim to alpha bloodlines could challenge the established order," Alexander explained. "Never mind that your bloodline is older and stronger than most of the current nobility combined." "Can we prove that?" Marina asked. "My bloodline, I mean. If I'm going to claim the title of Alpha Luna, shouldn't we be able to demonstrate that I'm entitled to it?" Alexander and Kieran exchanged a look that suggested this question had been weighing on their minds as well. "We've been researching that," Kieran said carefully. "The records of your family line are complicated." "Complicated how?" "Your great-grandmother was the last recognized Alpha Luna," Alexander explained. "But she died without formal heirs, and the bloodline was thought to have ended with her. Your grandmother was born posthumously and hidden away for her own protection." Marina frowned. "Hidden from whom?" "The same forces that would eventually become the Shadowmere Pack," Kieran said grimly. "Alpha Lunas have always been targets for those who seek to destabilize the natural order. Your family has been hunted for 3 generations." The revelation cast Marina's entire life in a new light. Her parents' overprotectiveness, their reluctance to let her spend time at court, the remote location of their territory, all of it suddenly made sense. "So when Darius attacked my pack," she said slowly, "he wasn't just eliminating a rival. He was trying to wipe out the Alpha Luna bloodline entirely." "Exactly," Alexander confirmed, "which makes your survival all the more remarkable." "And all the more threatening to him?" Marina absorbed this information in silence, feeling the weight of her heritage settling on her shoulders like a mantle. She wasn't just fighting for her own life, or even for Kieran's throne. She was fighting for the continuation of something ancient and precious, something that had been protected by her ancestors at great cost. On the 10th day of preparation, Marina's training was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. She was working through combat forms in the private garden outside her quarters when Storm's warning growl alerted her to someone's approach. Lady Catherine stood at the garden entrance, resplendent in a gown of deep purple silk that emphasized her considerable beauty. But there was something different about her today, a tension in her posture that suggested she had come for more than her usual attempts at psychological warfare. "Lady Marina," Catherine said with a curtsy that was technically perfect, but somehow conveyed mockery. "I hope I'm not interrupting your exercises." Marina set down her practice sword and faced the other woman fully. "What do you want, Catherine?" "I wanted to speak with you privately before the combat," Catherine said, stepping into the garden with careful grace. Woman to woman, as it were. "I'm listening." Catherine moved closer. and Marina caught a strange scent clinging to the other woman's expensive perfume, something wild and dark that set her instincts on edge. "I want to make you an offer," Catherine said quietly. "A way out of this unfortunate situation that benefits everyone." "What kind of offer?" Catherine's smile was cold and calculating. "Withdraw your challenge. Admit publicly that you're not ready for the responsibilities of being Luna. In exchange, I'll ensure that you're given a comfortable estate somewhere far from court, with enough wealth to live well for the rest of your life." Marina stared at her in disbelief. "You think I would abandon my mate and my responsibilities for money?" "I think you're intelligent enough to recognize when you're outmatched," Catherine replied smoothly. "You've been gone for 10 years, Marina. The game has changed in your absence. There are powers at work here that you don't understand." "What powers?" Marina demanded, but Catherine was already backing toward the entrance. "Consider my offer carefully," the other woman said, "because if you proceed with this foolish challenge, I can't guarantee your safety, regardless of who wins the combat." Before Marina could respond, Catherine was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive perfume and something else, something that made Storm's hackles rise and his lips curl back from his teeth. Marina spent the rest of that day troubled by the encounter, trying to puzzle out what Catherine had really been offering and what she had been threatening. The strange scent bothered her most of all, familiar in a way that she couldn't quite place. It wasn't until that evening, as she was reviewing ancient texts about Alpha Luna traditions with Alexander, that the answer hit her with the force of a physical blow. "Alexander," she said suddenly, interrupting his explanation of ceremonial combat protocols. "What do you know about Catherine's background?" He looked up from the dusty tome he'd been consulting. "Lady Catherine, noble family, well-connected, educated in all the appropriate accomplishments. Why? Where is her family from, specifically?" Alexander frowned, thinking. "The Northern Territories, I believe. Her father holds lands near the border with the Shadowmere Pack's traditional hunting grounds." Marina felt ice form in her veins. "How near?" "Marina, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Lady Catherine smells like the Shadowmere wolves," Marina said grimly. "I'm thinking that her sudden interest in my withdrawal might not be motivated by ambition alone." The implications of that possibility were staggering. If Catherine was working with Darius, then the palace had indeed been compromised. Worse, it meant that Marina's every move had potentially been reported to her enemy. "We need to tell Kieran," Alexander said immediately. "No," Marina said firmly. "Not yet. If Catherine is a spy, we can't let her know that we suspect her. We need proof." "Marina, if you're right about this, if I'm right, then we're going to use it to our advantage," Marina interrupted. "Let me think about this." That night, Marina lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through possibilities and plans. If Catherine was indeed working with the Shadowmere Pack, then Marina had been handed an unexpected opportunity. The question was how to use it, without exposing herself to even greater danger. The answer came to her just before dawn, elegant in its simplicity. She would give Catherine exactly what she appeared to want, information about Marina's plans and preparations. But the information would be carefully chosen to serve Marina's purposes rather than her enemies. Over the next few days, Marina began a subtle campaign of misdirection. She made sure Catherine overheard conversations about weaknesses in her combat training, concerns about her ability to shift effectively under stress, and doubts about her stamina during prolonged fighting. She even arranged for the other woman to witness a practice session, where Marina appeared to struggle with basic sword work. Catherine's reactions confirmed Marina's suspicions. Each piece of misinformation was received with barely concealed satisfaction, and Marina was certain that every detail was being passed along to Darius through whatever channels the spy had established. On the 13th day, Marina decided it was time for the final piece of her deception. "I'm worried," she confided to Alexander, during what she knew Catherine would overhear. "The shifting has been difficult lately. Sometimes I can barely manage a partial transformation, and even that leaves me exhausted." "Perhaps you should speak with the healers," Alexander replied, playing his part perfectly. "There might be herbs or treatments that could help." "I've tried everything," Marina said with convincing despair. "I think the trauma from my years in exile damaged something essential. I may not be able to shift at all during the combat." That evening, Catherine approached Marina with obvious glee poorly concealed beneath false sympathy. "I heard about your difficulties," she said with mock concern. "How terrible for you." Perhaps it would be wise to reconsider the combat. No one would think less of you for withdrawing under such circumstances. I can't, Marina replied, injecting just the right note of stubborn pride into her voice. Too much depends on this. I'll find a way to manage. Catherine's smile was predatory. Of course. Well, I'm sure everything will work out for the best. After the other woman left, Marina allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. If her plan worked, Darius would enter the combat ring expecting to face a weakened opponent who couldn't access her wolf form. The surprise when she revealed her true capabilities would, hopefully, be enough to give her the advantage she needed. The final day of preparation dawned gray and overcast, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon like an omen of the violence to come. Marina spent the morning in meditation, centering herself for what lay ahead. She had done everything possible to prepare, physically, mentally, and strategically. Now she had to trust in her training and her instincts to see her through. Kieran found her in the garden as the sun reached its zenith, sitting quietly among the flowers while her 3 wolf companions rested nearby. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling beside her on the stone bench. "Ready," Marina replied honestly. Scared, but ready, they sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the wolves doze in the afternoon sun. Finally, Kieran spoke. "Whatever happens today," he said quietly, "I want you to know that I've never been prouder of anyone in my life. You've shown a courage and strength that puts us all to shame." Marina turned to study his face, seeing the love and fear warring in his expression. "And I want you to know that whether or not I can feel our bond the way I used to, my feelings for you are real. I may not be able to love you the way you deserve, but I do love you, in my own way." Kieran's smile was sad but genuine. "That's enough," he said. "That's more than enough." The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted their moment of peace. Alexander appeared at the garden entrance, his formal court attire marking the solemnity of the occasion. "It's time," he said simply. Marina rose, her hand automatically checking the weapons at her belt, the bone knife from her mountain days, and the ceremonial sword that had belonged to her great-grandmother. She wore simple leather armor that allowed for maximum mobility, and her hair was braided back in the practical style she had favored during her years of exile. As they made their way through the palace toward the ceremonial combat ground, Marina felt a strange sense of completion settling over her. This was what she had been moving toward since the moment she fled into the mountains 10 years ago, a reckoning with the darkness that had shaped her life. The combat arena was an ancient amphitheater carved from living stone, capable of holding thousands of spectators. Today, it was filled to capacity with representatives from every corner of the kingdom, all eager to witness the confrontation that would determine their future. Marina paused at the arena entrance, taking in the sight of the assembled crowd. Lords and ladies in their finest clothes, merchants and craftsmen who had traveled for days to attend, farmers and laborers who had left their fields to witness history in the making, all of them depending on the outcome of the next few hours. "Remember," Alexander said quietly, "the combat is to the death, or until one party yields. There are no other rules, no restrictions on weapons or tactics. This is as close to actual warfare as the law allows." Marina nodded, her attention focused on the figure waiting in the center of the arena. Darius Blackthorn stood like a pillar of darkness against the pale stone, his massive frame radiating menace even at a distance. He wore black leather armor that seemed to drink the light, and the sword at his side was as long as Marina was tall. "He's bigger than I remember," she murmured. "Size isn't everything," Kieran said firmly. "You have advantages he doesn't. Speed, intelligence, and the element of surprise." The formal herald stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly across the arena as he announced the terms of combat. Ancient words in the old tongue, speaking of honor and justice and the settling of blood debts. "Lady Marina of House Silverstone," the herald called, "do you enter this combat of your own free will, understanding that the outcome will be final and binding?" "I do," Marina replied, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "Lord Darius of House Blackthorn, do you accept this combat under the ancient laws, with the understanding that victory grants you the right to claim the throne and all that comes with it?" "I do," Darius rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. "Then let the gods witness what transpires here, and let justice be done." Marina walked into the arena, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes upon her. With each step, The noise of the crowd faded until all she could hear was the sound of her own breathing and the whisper of wind across stone. Darius watched her approach with eyes like cold fire, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When she was close enough to see the details of his face, Marina was struck by how little he had changed. The same cruel intelligence, the same absolute confidence in his own superiority. "Little Luna," he said, his voice pitched to carry to the watching crowd. "You've grown since last we met, taller, if no less fragile." "I'm not the same person you broke 10 years ago," Marina replied calmly. Darius laughed, the sound harsh as breaking glass. "No, you still bear the scars I gave you. You still flinch when you remember what I did to your precious family." Marina felt anger flare in her chest, but pushed it down. Anger would make her careless, and she couldn't afford carelessness against an opponent like this. "You're right," she said, surprising him with her agreement. "I do remember. I remember every detail of what you did, every moment of pain you caused. I've been carrying those memories for 10 years, and they've made me stronger than you can imagine." Something flickered in Darius's eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or the first hint that this confrontation might not go as he had planned. "We'll see," he growled, drawing his massive sword with a flourish that sent sunlight dancing along its blade. Marina drew her own weapon, the ceremonial blade that had belonged to her ancestors. It was smaller than Darius's sword, but perfectly balanced, and she could feel the weight of history in its grip. The herald raised his hand, and the arena fell completely silent. "Let the combat begin." Darius attacked immediately, his sword cutting through the air where Marina had been standing a heartbeat before. She rolled aside, using her smaller size to advantage, and came up in a crouch with her blade extended. "Still running, little Luna?" Darius taunted, pursuing her with surprising speed for someone of his bulk. Marina didn't waste breath on a reply, focusing instead on staying ahead of his attacks while looking for openings. This was exactly the kind of fighting she had trained for during her years in the mountains. Desperate, brutal combat where a single mistake meant death. Darius's next swing missed her by inches, and Marina responded with a quick cut across his arm that drew blood. The crowd roared its approval, but Darius barely seemed to notice the wound. "First blood to you," he acknowledged with mock gallantry. "Shall we make it more interesting?" Without warning, his form began to blur and shift. Bones lengthened, muscles swelled, and dark fur erupted across his skin. In moments, a massive black wolf stood where the man had been, easily 3 times the size of any natural wolf Marina had ever seen. The crowd gasped in shock. Shifting during formal combat was legal, but rarely used, as it was considered beneath the dignity of most noble fighters. But Darius had never concerned himself with dignity. Marina backed away, her mind racing through options. In wolf form, Darius was faster, stronger, and nearly unstoppable. Her only advantage was that he would expect her to either flee or attempt to match his transformation. Instead, she did something unexpected. Marina threw her sword directly at Darius's head. The wolf dodged easily, exactly as she had known he would, but the movement put him slightly off balance. In that moment of vulnerability, Marina leaped forward and grabbed 2 handfuls of his dark fur. Before Darius could shake her off, Marina swung herself up onto his back, wrapping her legs around his massive torso and drawing her bone knife. The blade found the gap in his armor just below his shoulder, sliding deep between his ribs. Darius roared in pain and fury, bucking and twisting as he tried to dislodge her. Marina held on with grim determination, her mountain-trained muscles serving her well as she rode out his violent attempts to throw her. But she couldn't maintain her position forever. When Darius slammed himself backward against the arena wall, Marina was forced to let go or be crushed. She rolled aside, coming up bruised and battered but still functional. Darius shifted back to human form, blood streaming from the wound in his shoulder. His expression was no longer confident. It was the face of a predator that had just realized its prey had claws. "Clever," he admitted, retrieving his sword with his good arm. "But cleverness won't save you when I tear out your throat." "Maybe not," Marina agreed, circling him carefully. "But you're forgetting something important." "What's that?" Marina smiled, feeling the power building within her like a rising tide. "I'm not just clever. I'm an Alpha Luna." The transformation that followed was unlike anything the arena had ever witnessed. Light erupted from Marina's form, blindingly bright and shot through with silver and gold. When it faded, a magnificent wolf stood in her place, not as large as Darius, but radiating power that made the very stones of the arena tremble. The crowd erupted in amazement and terror, many falling to their knees at the display of raw alpha authority. Even Darius took an involuntary step backward, his eyes wide with something that might have been fear. "Impossible," he breathed. "Alpha Lunas are extinct. The bloodline died out generations ago." "Surprise," Marina said, her voice carrying clearly despite her wolf form. "Reports of our extinction have been greatly exaggerated. The final phase of the combat was brief, but devastating." Marina moved with speed and power that seemed to defy natural law. Her attacks coordinated and precise while Darius found himself struggling to keep up. The wound in his shoulder had weakened him more than he had realized, and facing a true Alpha Luna in her full power was proving to be more than he could handle. When the end came, it was almost anticlimactic. Marina's jaws closed around Darius's throat, not to kill but to demonstrate absolute dominance. The Alpha who had terrorized the kingdom for decades found himself pinned beneath a female half his size, completely helpless. "Yield," Marina commanded, her voice carrying all the authority of her bloodline. For a moment, it seemed as though Darius might prefer death to submission. Then, with visible effort, he forced out the words that ended the combat. "I yield," he gasped. "I yield." Marina released him, shifting back to human form as the arena erupted in celebration. The nightmare that had haunted the kingdom was finally over, and the Alpha Luna had returned to claim her rightful place. As Kirin rushed to embrace her, as Alexander grinned with relief and joy, as thousands of voices rose in acclaim, Marina felt something she had never expected to feel again. She felt like she had finally come home. The coronation ceremony 3 days later was the grandest the kingdom had seen in living memory. Marina stood beside Kirin as ancient words were spoken, as the crown of the Alpha Luna was placed upon her head for the first time in over a century. When the ceremony concluded, and they were officially proclaimed as the ruling pair, Kirin turned to her with eyes full of love and wonder. "How does it feel?" he asked quietly, while the crowd continued to cheer around them. Marina considered the question, thinking of all the paths that had led her to this moment. The pain and loss, the years of exile, the discovery of her true strength, and finally, the acceptance of her destiny. "It feels right," she said finally, and meant it with every fiber of her being. As they made their way through the celebrating crowds, Storm, Luna, and Ghost padding beside them, Marina caught sight of Catherine in the crowd. The other woman's face was a mask of barely controlled fury, and Marina knew that her troubles were far from over. There would be other challenges, other enemies who would test her resolve. But for now, surrounded by people who had chosen to trust her with their future, Marina felt ready for whatever might come. She had survived 10 winters on the mountain, faced down her greatest enemy, and claimed her place as the Alpha Luna. The hunt was over, and she had finally found where she belonged.